call to order the Friday, June 20th meeting of the Economic Development Plan Review Committee. Starting on the agenda, we'll start with roll call.
Blessam.
Here.
Feldner. Hammer. Howe.
Here.
Neither. Nelson.
Here.
Pittner.
Here.
Okay, please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, continuing on to the approval of the minutes from the prior meeting. Do we have a motion to approve? So let's bring a motion and then we can amend from there. Is
Oh, motion to approve.
there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Chairman Blessam, I'd have an amendment. I actually voted no on the motion for the consolidation of the Magic Fund Committee and the Renaissance Home Committee.
And Michaela, you have that, right? So we'll be able to make that amendment and get it adjusted in the minutes?
I'll second that.
Okay. Okay. Any other discussion on the amendment? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, back to the main motion of approval of the minutes. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, moving on into old business, again, continuing on with our bullet point review. Hopefully, we're nearing the end. Hopefully, we're getting to the point where we're going to be able to send something back to council relatively soon. Michaela sent out the current document for everybody to review. So really, we'll open the floor to normal motions again for adjustments to the document and to the ideas that we're sending back. A couple things that I do think we want to take up today to make sure that we do finalize them. In the document, Michaela has highlighted in yellow any questions related to MAC EDC, and if there were any adjustments or thoughts that we wanted to send back to council related to that. Otherwise, it's perfectly fine to leave that in the notes that we looked at it, and these are some things that we discussed, but it may not reach the point of a primary recommendation. So that's one thing that I wanted to note. And Paul, I know you've also got something that you'd like us to take up, and so we can take that. So for now, we'll entertain any motions. Michaela?
Jennifer, I pulled it up on Dias for HDMI. If there's anything that anyone wants me to move to, that's fine. This is the highlighted portion that was in there. If there's no discussion on it, that's fine. I'll unhighlight it and we'll just leave it the way it is for the recommendation, but
And so these were really just notes as we went along. And so if we don't have anything to send to council, we wouldn't necessarily even need to leave these notes here. If there's something specific that we did want to, just for everybody's kind of recollection, we did spend time discussing this, and we got into this question of, you could have 105 deliverables and a whole bunch of hoops for them to jump through every year just to prove that they're doing the job. Or what's probably preferable is to have a set of things that they need to deliver. They need to be doing interviews with businesses around town to understand the business climate, what's on the minds. There are certain specific things that need to be there. At the same time, the partnership overall ought to have a bunch of free space for them to work. And I think as long as the projects are going in the right direction, that's what we would want. But it's kind of hitting that middle ground I think we're looking for. So, yeah, go ahead, Paul.
I echo that, and I think that's where we rely on the relationship between the city manager and the executive director for organizations like MAC-EDC to have those conversations back and forth, so we can have a recommendation from our city manager. Hey, this is the direction, this partnership. These are deliverables that we need to find within that contract. We've had those discussions come before council in the past, whether it be memorandums of understanding, things like that. So again, I like the idea of having that lateral movement for those organizations within, because it's not, we've talked about it plenty at this, it's not black and white, it's not simple math in what we get out of these, so.
Right. Harold, do you have anything that comes to your mind that you'd like to see adjusted? Because I think this is one spot where we could tell council, hey, there's a couple very specific things here, or if the overall structure is working, we may not really be there.
Yeah, Mr. Chair Blessam. I was just reviewing over. I'm preparing for the meeting with Brecca on Monday The Magic Fund guidelines require the two of us to discuss and bring forth recommendations of what the economic development sales tax funds should be recommended to be utilized for through the different buckets and those kinds of things. And so I was just kind of looking over some of those numbers. One of the things that I've begun discussing with Breck a little bit would be the Lois subscription. Just a reminder, the Lois is similar to like your, let's say it's a Zillow for industrial commercial properties for a community where you can go and get data. So if you're looking to locate a site or looking for a building, that's a resource you can go to for a community to find out what sites are available, what the capacity of the infrastructure is, those kinds of things. Not sure how effective that's being utilized, and so we may want to look at a different alternative for that one. So that would potentially be one change that I would recommend that probably be addressed through the MACDC contract discussions. And then ultimately, I mean, while I agree with Paul, and I need to go have those conversations and discuss that and hopefully prepare a contract that represents what the council wants. I'd be curious to hear from the council what priorities you have, what accountability would you like to see for the investment of the $600,000+ that we invest into our partner with MACDC. I'd like to see some further delineation with regards to workforce development. Maybe some better goals and objectives. That's probably hard to measure, but it'd be good to put something in paper that, or at least making an effort and trying to measure that, and how our current efforts are progressing. Those are a couple of things that come off of top of mind. Obviously, I'd like to see more success in the recruitment side in growth and retention of our industrial. We've had some great successes, and I think we have some in the works. But I'd like to hear from the chamber, and particularly probably Mark Lyman, who specializes in this, of where are our gaps and how can we invest this money to help meet those gaps. So.
Okay, Paul?
Just a question for city manager. We've heard this before, and again, working through this process, a lot of that stuff remains confidential or whatnot. Is NAS a contributing factor, completion of NAS for the industrial park, for manufacturing, things like that?
Well, NAS is definitely a significant component. I mean, one of the limiting factors of any community growing is your access to water. So anything you can do to increase water supply and quality, the better chance you have for growth and development. So for example, having worked in the Southwest down in Arizona, water is a limited resource. And that's a big topic of conversation down in the Southwest right now. There isn't enough water for their current population, let alone growth, but they continue to grow, right? Here, fortunately, the city of Minot's in a great position with water capacity, and that's enhanced even more with NAS. So it is a contributing factor. In some of the projects that we're talking about, access to water is important. Now, whether that's potable water or what we call gray water after it's treated, those are different components. But yes, NAS definitely plays a factor in that. And it also frees up some of our capacity with our underground wells, because as we become more dependent on NAS or surface water, we still have those wells available to us. One, to serve as a backup to our system, but two, gives us an opportunity for some economic growth and commitment.
All right, yeah, Jordan?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when I look at your contract with the Chamber EDC, and I'm going to largely echo what's been said by city manager, it's a living relationship, and you're probably going to have needs changing throughout. I guess the biggest thing I would say is, good in my book, and I'll say it, take it to my grave, a good government's transparent government. And I would just recommend we do whatever we can to spell out those goals clearly, knowing that this is an investment. It's not just free use of the money. Make sure that the city is getting what it wants for the money it's spending.
Yeah, and to that end, the first bullet we have in the notes here is that is whether MACEDC should provide additional detail on how the public funds or city funds are spent yearly. you know, from the accounting side, I think of it as, let's see a P&L. Let's see actually where the dollars went and what they were used for. You know, I think the relationship warrants a certain amount of flexibility in how they go about that. But we also run into things as we did over the last year where you've got entities like the MAC EDC who are using maybe member funds for certain initiatives, but under the same banner, under the same logo, under the same Facebook accounts and all of that stuff. And so, you know, that bullet, remembering the discussions now, that bullet to me may be of interest. It's not meant to be onerous or over the top, but at the same time, I think that transparency you talked about, Jordan, is important, and that the people understand that the $600,000 is meant to do these types of things, and here is how it's being used.
So I'm going to ask this as a genuine question, just because while your meetings are fairly entertaining every first and third Monday, I don't watch every one of them. You guys that are on the council, do you think that what you're getting right now is sufficient?
I'll let Paul answer for himself, but my answer to that would be right now, I feel that the relationship that I have with Brecca and her team has reassured me that we are headed in the right direction. Does that mean that everything's perfect and that we couldn't do things slightly differently if I was king and I wanted to do it a different way? Of course not, because that's human nature. At the same time, I feel I am more confident today than the day I got elected that those things are happening. But I do have lingering questions, and related to this first bullet that I said, that I think transparency is a good thing. And if I'm going to ask for that in other things that we're doing, this is certainly a place where we want it. And Paul, if you want to add as well.
Yeah, no, I'll echo that. You know, from when I first got on council, obviously there was even different leadership at the Chamber EDC, and I think even in that change of leadership, we've seen more transparency, we've seen more detail in the reports. You know, not just this one page, you know, overview front and back of what happened in the last year. We dive into detail, but again, it is a tricky thing when we're asking them to carry out, you know, recruitment of manufacturing and some of these in some of these industries. It's all very confidential, and we would love to know what's going on. But in the conversations that I've had with the team over there, again, I am reassured that we are, like Mike said, heading in the right direction. Do you always want more? Absolutely, but I think that's a good thing. Those conversations happen on an annual basis, on a renewal of a contract. Hey, do we need to shift focus? Do we need to go from workforce to childcare to, you know, land development? What do we need to do? Sure. So again, I think the team over there, along with the direction of council, is very fluid in whatever direction we're going to go. So I appreciate the relationship.
Sure.
The other thing, go ahead, Jordan.
And I wasn't asking about, you know, I was mainly asking whether if the council feels that what they're getting from the chamber is largely sufficient, then I don't know if we need to have anything in here. You know, if you guys are feeling like, hey, there's something missing here, then I think this is a great report to highlight that. But if you're not constantly plugged into the ins and outs of what's getting reported to the city council, I don't know that we would know whether it's sufficient or not. It's kind of a question for the council more than it is for anything else, because you guys are the ones appropriating the money.
And, you know, the other thing that I would add too, there's another aspect to the relationship with MAC EDC that's very important. I feel like right now our relationship in Bismarck and with the legislature, with our federal delegation, all of the things that matter so much for so many things that go on in our community, I feel are good. I think this last legislative session, whether you're talking about flood control dollars or NOS dollars or whatever that is, I feel that those things are moving in the right direction. And I know that Brecca and her team are an important part of that puzzle. And it's important that we not lose sight of the fact that it's more than did we get a new business to open up this year. And so I think we want to keep the big picture in mind. But I will just to sort of move us along, because we're not working inside a motion right now, which I would prefer as often as we can. I would entertain a motion related to bullet 1 that would ask for more detail on how the city funds are spent. And if there's a motion, we can have that discussion, decide if we want to move on it, and that would be okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay, so, all right, so we've got a motion and a second. Discussion on that. Again, this is not meant to be onerous. It's not meant to add a ton of work. It's really meant to make sure that the transparency that we're looking for throughout government is there. I think that's the key thing that we're looking for under this, at least from my perspective. So if there's any other discussion, I'd be happy to have it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think that's fair. You don't just dole out money and not expect, an accounting of how it's being used to a third-party service provider. I think that's completely reasonable. I don't think you're asking too much, and I don't think that it's cracking down on anything. I just think it's good government.
Well, and to me, to that point, I would rather do it while things are fine
Absolutely.
and get it in place so that we avoid ever not having it be fine. I think that's the right time to do that type of work. Okay? Yeah, go ahead, Harold. Yeah.
I just wanted to remind the group that there are a couple of things that are part of the connection between the city and the chamber that we haven't discussed already. And that is, number one is that the mayor sits on the board. And at the board, they review all financial statements during the time period. So the mayor has firsthand knowledge and review of that. And in addition, the minutes of those meetings by contract are required to be provided to the city, which we have been receiving regularly, and then I forward to the council as well. So there is that link of transparency there as well. I just want to make sure that everyone kept that in mind going forward.
Linda?
I just think like in the community too, like there are always questioning, where these funds are going. So it protects the integrity of what they're doing too. So like, it's helpful, the city's doing what they're supposed to do, but it's also like helping to show that they are doing what they're doing. So I think it's good to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, Jordan?
Yeah, and what city manager was just saying, that's kind of why I asked my question to you guys as the council. I don't see those minutes, but if you guys are seeing them and you're doing your oversight function, then at some point, taxpayers, citizens, Minot, like we're relying on council. So that's why I asked the question, because this is a good spot for if there needs to be something to, direct some improvement. But if you guys are getting those minutes and the mayor, when we have one again, is sitting in those meetings and knows what's going on, well, and at some level we're relying on you guys.
Mark, I'd be interested if you have any comments one way or the other. I know you maybe caught us in the middle of where we were headed there, but if there's anything you want me to restate, we certainly can.
Mr. Chairman, members of
One
the
of the other
committee.
guys.
I think the conversation about having transparency in government is an important one. To city manager's point, those meeting minutes are there every single month. The financials are visible to the mayor every single month. There are clearly a lot of things that the Chamber EDC does. I think, to Paul's point, over the last 4 or 5 years, we've provided a level of detail that wasn't there. I've had the conversation with counterparts across the state. It's all over the place. Some people have relatively small budgets in relatively small communities, and a lot of very upfront, honest conversations about where did these $50 go, where did this $5,000 go. And some, their contract with the entity that they are getting $500,000 from, like I think Bismarck, their contract is a half a page. And it's really broad. And they still provide all those same reports that we talk about, but contractually there's a really good relationship there. So I appreciate that you highlighted that relationship is a good one. Yeah, we're open to that conversation.
So, yeah, go ahead, Harold.
Well, we have Mark up here and just kind of think through how we could maybe add some more transparency for the public. And I don't know how difficult it is for you to provide information on your website, but maybe one of the requirements we could consider is that the chamber has to provide some transparency of the public funds on the website, that if the public wants to go and see we received $660,000 from the city. Where is the chamber investing that money? And that would be available on their website for easy access. I don't know what the probability or capability of doing that is, just trying to come up with an idea here off the cuff a little bit.
Mr. Chairman, to Harold's point, we could easily, I mean, we've got a 10-page report that you guys see every 6 months as a city council. It'd be very easy to look at that and say, okay, in order for that to happen, you have to spend money. I mean, I think there are opportunities to communicate what we do. It's hard in the world of NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. Some of that has to be broad, otherwise we lose our effectiveness and then you don't get anything out of that effort. I think we should continue the conversation.
Yeah, and I guess to that point, I think what the motion does here is it says to council, this mattered enough to us that we'd like you to take a look at it. Yeah. And council could decide to say, hey, yeah, the website is the right way to do it. As part of our report that we get every 6 months, it needs to be a page that lines out, dollar by dollar where it goes. I think it leaves the council the leeway based on, kind of to Jordan's point, based on what our level of comfort is with what we're looking for. And just being blunt about it, Mark, for me, the idea that we sat at council, I remember having Brecca come up and talk about Measure 4 and how the chamber participated in one side of that issue. And it had to be made clear that those were not city funds that were used to do that. That was your membership funds that were used to do that. I think the public deserves that transparency, and that it should be clear that that's how those types of things happen. So I think for me, that's what I would be looking for out of something that was along these lines, is just to understand. Because again, I'm with you. Like it's not going to have a line item that says, hey, we went and met with these guys at this city and here's what we spent it on. It would be, primary sector recruiting is what that line item might be in that report. Because I think we all respect that those are confidential discussions, and I think we'd be comfortable with that. So I don't know if that spurs any thoughts, Mark, or anything you want to add.
Nothing new.
Okay,
No.
that's fine. All right, any other discussion or anything for Mark while we've got him? Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, any further discussion on the motion? So Michaela, do you essentially have it as elevating that bullet as is? Is that the?
Yeah, so it's on the screen
Okay.
here. I just took out a few words and just put MAC-EDC provides more detail on how City of Minot funds are spent yearly.
Okay, clear for everybody? All right, and just as a reminder, because we are down at 4 members, we would need a 4-0 vote to pass this. So go ahead and call the roll.
Nelson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Blessam,
Yes.
Howe.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, continuing on, new motions.
Let's just go down the list of the highlighted ones we have. We have regular communication with MAC, EDC, City of Minot staff, and Magic Fund Screening Committee. I think that's accomplished already. I think we covered that.
Anything that you think needs to be adjusted in that, Harold, or you think all that works well? Okay,
So I don't know if we need to make a motion to strike that from the report, or.
yeah, that would
Okay,
make it
I'll
easy.
I'll make that motion to strike that line.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Blessam,
Yes.
Howe,
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Okay, continuing on.
We'll take, again, consolidating the MAC, EDC, service agreement deliverables, we talked about that, we touched on that again. We want to keep that lateral movement within there, I believe having a clear direction is important, and I think we have that with the agreement that we have. So again, leaving that somewhat broad for them to be, again, also agile to respond to the needs of the community, I would also make a motion to strike that.
And I'll second that as well.
Any discussion? I think unless we had something very direct we wanted to put in, I think it's appropriate just to pull it, because the council's going to do this anyway. Yeah.
To that point,
Yep.
to your last comment, the council's going to do that again. If it ends up being workforce as a priority, we're going to direct them to, hey, we need to focus on workforce. We need to focus on childcare. We need to focus on whatever it might be to add on to the already underlying theme that they're trying to carry out. So,
Okay, any further discussion? All right, call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Wesson,
Yes.
Howe, Nelson.
Yes.
Okay, continuing on.
Okay, I might kind of pause on this one because it'll parlay into the Magic Fund Screening Committee. So again, I delivered if Jennifer, if you could bring up one of the attachments that I brought, I guess either or will probably work. So something that again, we've touched on this. We've touched on what some of the other communities around the state are doing. We talk about Williams County offering, I think they're up to like a $25,000 per lot infrastructure grant for development. We talked about at council the Ramstead development, looking at about $87,000 per lot on bringing infrastructure into those lots. And the reality is that's what some of the costs are for development. So again, I think just the city, maybe a recommendation coming out of this committee is how do we take a more proactive role in getting developers, builders to the city or within the city working towards developing some of these properties so that we have lots that aren't sitting there shovel ready with infrastructure to them, where we've made these investments, gathering a couple $100 a year in property taxes. How do we get them actually online? So this was a crack at. I've reviewed this with a couple different individuals, but again, this is kind of the high level, and this is absolutely 100% open to refinement. So this is just the overview of a development incentive partnership program. The purpose of this is to match landowners and builders to move Minot forward. So to accelerate local development by matching landowners with interested builders, developers, and providing strategic incentives to reduce project barriers. Again, there is a gap. There's a gap in infrastructure. There's a gap in cost where some of these things just do not pencil out. I don't think you could give the Ramstead land away at this point and get it to pencil out. It's extremely difficult. So again, the city-supported initiative to connect landowners with shovel-ready sites to developers seeking projects, offer incentives to make projects more feasible, streamline regulatory or permitting processes, encourage infill, affordable housing, mixed-use growth. Again, this is a case-by-case basis. I know the buzzwords are picking winners and losers, but if at the end of the day, the city of Minot's one of the winners, and we're growing our tax base through infill and bringing properties online, I think it can be. I think there's a way to get there. So, again, I'll move down. Who is eligible? Open, vacant, or underutilized land within Minot city limits, and their open development partnerships. Again, there's some property out there within Minot or next to Minot that probably isn't for sale or want to be utilized or developed, and that's fine. But we do have some property that's out there, even actively currently in our MLS that's being marketed. It's being utilized as, call it agricultural land, but it's being marketed as land to be developed. That's the price on some of that land. So if there's an incentive to get that to sell to someone that's willing to develop it, maybe there's a path forward. So again, builders, developers, who's eligible? Again, builders, developers who have proven development track record or interest in Minot-based projects, submit a basic development concept or interest form. Incentive packages to include, and again, there can be other ones. Are there ways to get this to move forward? Tax abatements, impact fee waivers, pre-development grants, density height bonuses, expedited permitting, site prep support, utility hookup assistance. Again, we talk about some of the examples we've had for special assessments. Some of the difference on these projects penciling out, even when infrastructure is to the property, is $10,000, per lot here or there, that maybe the city can have a role in, whether it's special assessments or a grant program for infrastructure costs. How to apply, again, we'd have to develop an application form. We'd have to go through city staff review, matchmaking meeting. Again, I feel this as being kind of a standing committee, and not necessarily a new committee. And that's where I'm parlaying this into this discussion with the Magic Fund Screening Committee. We've had a decent amount of conversations as to how little the Magic Fund Screening Committee meets. So maybe we put them on something else. Maybe we consolidate the Renaissance Zone, because again, there's plenty of times where the Renaissance Zone, I sit on that as a liaison to that committee. There's plenty of times where our meetings get canceled because we don't have enough going on. So again, project support begins if aligned. Project proceeds with city support. So moving on to the other document that I provided, again, just an overview. We don't have to do a deep dive into this. Again, it outlines basically what I've talked about. But the LDPC shall maintain a centralized public inventory of developable or underutilized parcels. We have that. we have that John Van Dyke, when he was with the city, developed, a report on what he called arrested developments. This land, whether you Tolberg Shores, Bolton Heights, the Ramstead development, this land that is ready to be developed, that was in the city of Minot, that would be a direct influx into the property tax and like I say, some of these properties as well. You talk about Bolton Heights. To my best of my knowledge, we're already taking care of those roads and that infrastructure. We've made that investment, but we're not capitalizing on that. We're not getting the money back through property taxes because those lots are sitting as vacant lots. So facilitate matchmaking. Again, think of this as a Tinder between landowner and developer. Where does the city connect those dots? How do we bridge that gap? So again, recommend policies, zoning amendments. Again, some of this stuff doesn't have to be a financial commitment. It can be a policy review. It can be a regulatory change. Hey, these setbacks or this density just doesn't work for this development. And how do we not try to put a square peg in a round hole, but kind of change the goalposts so that it can be successful for case-by-case basis. Evaluate and support proposals for development on public and private land, provide recommendations or incentives, including fast-track permits or financial support, engage with community and report quarterly to the city council on progress, collaborate with city staff and streamline development process. I have a membership, I put 9 members and then I put a number of options, and there's ones that I've even added sitting with this as myself right now. Council member, planning and zoning official, city manager, landowner representative, builder developer rep, local lender, city attorney, local real estate agent, at-large member of the public, Minot Association of Builders rep, engineering staff, local title company rep. And when I made this list, I'll be honest with you, the reason I added some of these because I had individuals in mind for some of these positions because I know that they take an act. They understand the difficulties that we're seeing with housing shortages and some of the opportunity there. A representative from each or every one of our utility companies, because they might have a role to play in some of this stuff when it comes to getting utilities into development. School board member, park, again, the other taxing entities if it were necessary. I also added a member from the chamber, a rep from the chamber. Maybe, obviously, sorry, Dave, Jenna, finance director. Someone from the finance department should probably be on this committee when we talk about using city dollars. So again, how do we fund some of these things? Whether we look at Magic Fund dollars as part of utilizing those funds to kickstart development, economic development dollars. But again, I saw this as more of a consolidation of government. When we take the Magic Fund Screening Committee and what they are or are not doing to no fault of their own, just from the lack of requests, and maybe the Renaissance Zone, and we just become more efficient. So I'll stand for some questions if anybody has anything. Obviously, we've got a little bit of a light committee, but I just thought this was something that addressed an issue that we've been talking about throughout this committee, and that was lack of housing, lack of development, and kickstarting some of that. So again, I'll stand for any questions, just as a brief overview.
So Paul, with where you're sitting with it right now, are you looking for us to add this as a recommendation, say maybe the establishment of the Land Development Partnership Committee, with maybe a couple bullet points under it that essentially say, here's some thoughts.
Yep.
And the document's certainly here and ready for council or headed that way. Is that your thought right now? Or do you want to, because again, if we do that, we can do it under a motion, we can move towards putting it in. If it's more of just a discussion point, I'm okay with that. I mean, I think we're pretty close to the end here. So I think however you want to go about it is fine with me.
And I'll say this. If we don't have to have another one of the Economic Development Committee meetings, and we could put this to council as just a recommendation to form, not as an action item, but as, hey, look into this. Have this discussion, have staff come back, maybe community development, Brian Billingsley can look at this and say, how can we consolidate Magic Fund Screening Committee, Renaissance Zone with some of the membership that we have that can carry out the roles on this, and how do we put a team together that knows what we're talking about with some of this stuff.
And that was exactly my thought, because I think there are very good discussions in here. I mean, I think I'm right with you on bringing the right people into the room and talking through what are the obstacles to getting done what we want to get done. The place where you and I might differ is once we get to the dollars, right? But there's a good discussion all the way up to that point where it still may be perfectly valid even if we don't do the dollars or we do. So I think for me, that makes sense. And I think it does bring back where my mind has gone all along, which is, do we need to look at making sure whether you call them a Renaissance Zone subcommittee of this or the Magic Fund subcommittee of this, because they're focused on those approvals. There's a few ways to look at that to try to consolidate that and keep a like-minded set of people working.
So I guess I'll make that motion. I'll make the motion to enter this into the report as something for the council to consider forming.
Okay, so you want to state it for Michaela? Do you have it? Do you think the way?
And I don't know how easy it is to go back and forth, Jen, but I, just consider establishing a land development partnership committee. It's always something that we, if these are the final pages that want to go to council, this could be a supplement to the recommendation, if that's how you would like.
As a
or-
starting point, and Paul would certainly have time to continue developing it if that's where you wanted to go. Yeah.
Just have a thought. Is this, I like the idea of this. Do you think this is something that could also encompass maybe like vacant buildings? Like people that own a vacant building, maybe it ends up being something, like just an avenue for them to go to and ask more questions. How could they connect with somebody who wants a business or a builder that would help them develop that as well?
Yeah,
I don't know how to exactly, I'm thinking of it in my brain, but
Well,
just.
real quick, Paul, can one of the two of you second his motion so we can?
Yeah, I'll second
Okay,
it.
Jordan's got it. Oh, perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead, Paul.
No, and I think this is the framework, right? And when I did this with the mind of just developing housing.
Yeah,
I did it with
yeah.
just housing in mind. And housing mixed use, how do we get some of those parcels when I talk about those developments, Bolton Heights, Tolberg Shore, again, the ones that we're all well aware of. I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to. I don't know if that requires a different group of individuals in the room. I could probably star some of these items in here that probably have to be in here outside of city staff. But you probably need to have a local lender, someone that understands the financial constraints. When someone comes in and wants to do a project and they have to bond for it, when they have to put up the funds at the beginning. So a local real estate agent, that understands the market, the shortages within housing and what's desired. You can come in, some say, I want to build up, 100 townhomes. It's like, well, you have a real estate agent that's on this committee that says there is no demand for townhomes right now. So again, I could highlight a handful of these. Would the existing buildings, when we talk about, whether it's the Trinity buildings or what we talk about, and again, it's not ours, it's the federal government, but what'll happen with Job Corps, right? With those buildings, if someone wanted to come in and develop that, I don't think it's unattainable to add that to be part of the purview of this committee.
And I think the motion naturally would do that because we would be talking at council about what's the concept and who's involved. So,
Yep.
Good thoughts. Okay, more discussion? Yeah, Jordan.
Yeah, I think, obviously this is just a really cold first look and there's not a lot of particulars here as far as dollars and cents. That's what you guys will, I'm sure, be looking at in the council side. But I like the idea of identifying the issue and trying to spur some discussion at the council level to try to make it better. Alderman Pittner, you said something earlier before the meeting. There's roughly, 200 sites?
Yeah, I'll look at Brian. I don't know, Brian, if you have any update. 200, I think it's between 200 and 300. I think when we had that Arrested Development presentation with John Van Dyke, I believe it was north of 300, if anybody remembers. Yep, Brian's giving me a thumbs up. So it was north of 300. We've seen some of that be developed in Harvest Heights and whatnot, but those were probably the closest to being ready to be developed. I mean, those had the lowest barriers of entry into being shovel ready.
Yep.
So again, how do we get the next group? The next group that's a little bit more difficult, and there are some that are really difficult.
Right. That's what I was getting at. It's kind of like a bank where we have unfunded lines of credit. You might have $1 million commercial line of credit and it's got 0 on it. And we have to model out how much of that's going to fund, and it never all funds. So you might have 200 sites. Maybe only 110 of them are ever actually going to have something built on. The other 90, for whatever reason, nobody wants them, too many pitfalls to living there, what have you. Which, if I think about it, that's actually not that many sites. You look at how little is for sale right now in Minot. You know, if it's 100 sites, that would help, but you know, a growing community, that's not a lot either. So, you know, I think it's good to have these discussions up front. Where it goes, I have no idea, but you know, you guys will. That's why they pay you the big bucks. So, you know, but I think it's good to have the
Yeah,
conversation.
and another thing that, you know, another option on here is, you know, even annexation. You know, if someone wants to develop, maybe they want to develop and be annexed into the city to have the city maintain services. There might be something on the cusp of the city that's not within our purview. There's some of these islands that we talk about that are out there where you look at the city of Minot, you know, it almost completely surrounds certain parcels. And again, maybe there's a development that wants to happen in there that would, you know, be parlay into the annexation conversations. You know, what do we need to do? I just feel like, again, from this committee that we've, the some of the hurdles that we've discussed, we need to put some people on it. You know, we need to start having some discussions and see what comes in front of us.
Harold, or possibly Brian, are there, you know, along those lines, are there any statistics that come to mind for how healthy growing communities look? Is it, you know, I'm thinking like percentage of lots available. Like, is there any way for us to know how we sit right now? I think we all feel constrained. I think that's sort of the idea here. But is there a way to put statistics to that or thoughts to it nationwide?
Well, I remind the group and the committee that we paid for a housing assessment study about a year ago that had several recommendations in it. That would be a good baseline to start with. And they do go through some statistical analysis and projecting future needs and growth and how many units we would need to have available for construction going forward. I guess one thing that I'd be curious in hearing as the city manager, particularly from the realtor groups and maybe some of our developers that are constructing new homes, like what is the demand for that? I mean, I see a lot of communities, they build construction homes and then maybe they sit for a year. Is that happening in Minot, or are they sold pretty much as soon as they start building, right? Those to me are indicators of demand. And then the other key indicator is the market values of your existing stock. Is that continuing to rise? Because that shows a pressure that if people want or need or have to live in your community and there's a limited stock, how quickly your market values are growing can be an indicator of that demand as well. And most of our realtors and bankers are going to be able to help us know those statistics.
And I think for me, just based on what you've got here, Paul, that's a lot of the knowledge we should be pulling, right? Like they should be able to come to the table in these meetings and say, hey, statistically, here's why this is happening. Here's what we're seeing in other communities. Like we'll go to Jordan, then back to Paul.
You know, one thing I was just going to say too that just came to my mind. I remember when you guys had the Ramstead development, and I remember reading in the newspaper that when our flood protection project actually is finalized, you're going to lose 20% of your housing stock. You factor 200 open lots, but you're going to lose 20% of your housing stock. It's going to get tight. And as somebody who works in a bank, I would, to your questions, home values up. Spec homes are sold before they close. Like, I don't know if I could tell you the last time it didn't happen that way. So, you know, you look at the NMLS, there's almost nothing on it. There's a demand for housing for whatever reason. And some of that is you have homeowners like me who have a 2.whatever% mortgage rate. We're frozen. And that's a bigger problem that the city of Minot's not going to solve. But how do we work around it? I think lots of communities are dealing with this, and I don't know that any of the answers are rosy and awesome. But I think it's probably something that, you know, this type of an approach, however it ends up being modeled out, could be a good thing, because I think you're going to have to take a proactive approach to it and presume that we're not going back to a sub 4.5% mortgage rate. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Paul?
So again, to just answer a couple of your questions, one, yes, and I'll echo what Jordan said, the stock is low. Like when you go to the MLS, housing stock inventory is very low. When something comes on the market, it goes quick. right? Your average days on market, I think, is less than 30 days. When you talk about, spec homes, they're not sold before they're built. They're sold before the hole gets punched in the ground. Mike Hayes with Four Seasons Construction who's slowed as of recently due to the lack of developable land. I don't know if there was a house when he was building 30 to 40 homes, permits a year. I don't know if there was a single home where he punched a hole in the ground or it wasn't sold before he punched a hole. I mean, there is a demand. There is absolutely a demand for it. And again, to Jordan's point too, it's like, we have a lot of tools that we could use, whether it's, tax abatements, special assessments, but then now there's things like Williams County with infrastructure grants and things like that. People are starting to try new things because we're kind of up against the wall and we need to be more proactive. And I think if we don't start doing some of those things or start being open or looking at some of those things, we are going to get left behind. You're going to see the county start to do those. Maybe not the county, but county could start to do those things on the outskirts of Minot, where you start to see some of these developments, whether it's Beaver Creek, Galusha Ranch, some of these things where there's not the constraints of building within the city limits, and then the city is, I don't want to say missing out, but we're definitely not capitalizing.
So there's something strange that I'll go back to again, and we talked about this through the childcare discussion. We're living in this world where the market-driven effects don't seem to be working, and I don't understand that. If Four Seasons can build or work on building 30 to 40 homes a year and have them all sold before they even get things rolling, there's something broken along that process. And from my understanding, they have been able to do that without all the pieces that we might be talking about dollars-wise. So the constraint is somewhere else. It's got to be on who owns the land, right? We have people that are holding on to land because they're speculating it'll be worth even more in the future. We ran into the thing with the schools around Ramstead where, for me, the biggest thing there is that the board wasn't able to move quickly enough. Their structure made it difficult for them to get through the process to actually get that into play in time, and we sort of got out of there. So I guess I'd love to hear from you guys or any thoughts on why do we keep seeing markets not function the way that we would expect? I mean, if we're going to be free market capitalists, as I think virtually most Americans are, why doesn't this work? There's got to be money in it if there's demand, right, Jordan?
One of the things you just brought up, I mean, there's going to come a time, my wife and I, we're going to sell our house, buy a townhouse. There'll be some demand for them, actually. But, when I see there's 20% of the housing stock's going to be gone, and I see the trajectory of the housing market within Minot, you're absolutely right. I am speculating the value is going to keep going up. I don't know if we can break it. I mean, interest rates going up to 7% didn't break the market. I think it made it really unaffordable, and I think people are just, we're going to create a 40-year mortgage or something like that to get the payment to the right level. Is it a great idea? No, it's terrible. But that's what's most likely coming. And if that's the case, shoot, my $425,000 house probably be worth $500,000 in 5-6 years. And I think there's people that probably do feel like that. And you combine that with the cheap mortgage against it, it's not a terrible idea. But to what you were asking, I think I saw right before I came over here, there's and this is a bigger can of worms, maybe I shouldn't even bring it up. There was an article a young kid posted about why Minot people have such a negative perception towards the community, and he brought up a lot of fair points, a lot of good questions, maybe not a ton of answers because we don't have them. But it just seems like for whatever reason, when we're seeing home builders at the bank that I work at, when they're building houses, it's 3 or 4 a year. Now that Four Seasons isn't really building, and Four Seasons isn't building, like you said, out of land that fits their model. Well, how do we get things to the point where it fits somebody's model so that we can get, 5 or 6 times the level of activity. And I mean, I think that's what you're going for here, and I think that's a good thing. You know, we need it accelerated on a larger scale. It just seems like we're just kind of forgotten. And so you're leaving it up to local people who don't have the capacity to build at the level that we need right now, largely because we've sat on our hands for so long that now we're behind and we got to catch up.
So where's the constraint? I mean, we're saying there aren't enough buildable lots, which I get that. I mean, I understand, but what's holding that up? Or do we have a bunch of people holding onto land thinking in 5 more years I'll get even more for it? Why isn't there a natural progression that other communities would have? And go where you were going, Paul. You don't have to just answer.
Yeah, no, again, I think when you talk about constraints, I think it's there's multiple facets there, right? I don't think there's just this big glaring issue, but whether it was, again, people overpaid during the boom, right? And now they're stuck on this land they're sitting on. Whether it's the cost of infrastructure, we see it within our city budgets now. You know, the square mile of linear mile of asphalt is not as cheap as it was 6 years ago, 5 years ago, when you talk about doing curb and gutter and paving roads. I mean, those are the big expenditures in these developments. And another point I want to make is with this idea and this concept, there is a very clear difference between a builder and a developer.
Very much so.
And that's one thing that I think we needed to hammer on too, is that a landowner can be a developer. They don't necessarily know what the heck they're doing. I would say this, that even Four Seasons Construction, they were not developers. They were builders.
Right.
They just wanted to build homes. So to that point, can we connect a developer, someone that can finance a local builder that says, you want to take this project, this is part of your portfolio as a venture capitalist? Yeah, I can build you 200 homes. I can do a 40 home a year phase project and do a development. To me, it's how do we foster those relationships with the city and be open for business, and maybe there are some regulatory changes that can make. Maybe we can squeeze a few extra lots into a development. I don't know, we sat on a DRT with engineering on Stonebridge.
Yeah.
And we're going to require you to pave this road back there. Well, it doesn't make that sucks up all of my profits, right? If I have to do that. It wasn't even a city road. I think it was a township road. So again, it's some of those things, some of those things, like we holding up a project, you got a dime holding up a dollar. And what is more important to the city, and again, that's a discussion for council to have, is having that road paved worth holding up 30 single family homes, 30 to 40 single family homes that would go from, being ag land, garnering, $300 a year in property taxes on the entire parcel to something that's going to garner $4,000 on 30 lots. So again, getting a developer, landowner, a builder, and the city being somewhere in the mix. I don't know. I don't know if this works. I don't know if this helps things pencil out, but it's at least taking a proactive role in trying to make some of that happen versus waiting for the fish to jump in the boat.
Yeah, I'll take a crack at answering your question a little bit, and some of you have already kind of hit on some of the points I was going to make, but it's a mix of factors. It could be as much as a generational difference, right? Where our younger generations are waiting till later in their life to get married and have kids, and some of them don't want to own the home. The American dream of the single family home with the white picket fence is fading, and they're moving to communities that have a more active lifestyle, living downtown, multifamily, which is why the proposal for the in-building was attractive. I'd have to go back and check and make sure that those statistics are still holding. Some of my stuff I'm saying maybe 5 years old may not be as relevant now as it used to be. In addition, typically in your communities, your older housing stock becomes your more affordable housing. But as your older generations are spending longer times living in those homes, that gums up the process. We also have the challenge that Paul was just talking about with regards to there's a difference between a home builder and a developer. We it was probably about a year and a half or so ago that Brian and I sat down and met with one of those development companies out of Bismarck that owns land in Minot already. And they told us it isn't even necessarily a Minot issue. We don't do residential development anymore as a company. We've transitioned to commercial development. There's a higher return on investment with commercial development, and we don't play in the residential development sandbox anymore as a company. And so some of those companies are pulling out, which is why Brian and his team have done a great job of trying to have meetings here over the last few months and trying to help educate and grow some developers within our community. But the challenge is return on investment, and that's what I often hear. We have a high demand. We're a hot market, but we're not as hot as some others. And some of these companies that are still in the game with doing this, they're focused on bigger markets with higher return on investment where they can build more homes at a higher profit value. And Minot hasn't hit that. Some of it is Minot's location and, to Jordan's point, reputation, right? All those factors come into play. Interest rates on homes and those kinds of things. All that plays a factor. And I'll finish up on Paul's point, and that is that until our community comes to the realization that perhaps government has to have some role in this, including financially, in covering the cost of infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, those kinds of things, it's going to be difficult to break down that wall. We can continue to hold that line, but these are the effects that we're seeing in holding that line. And until we do differently, that makes it much harder. I'll give an example. When I was in Iowa, there was a neighboring community called Newton, Iowa. On an interstate between the Cedar Rapids and Des Moines area, really just kind of right outside of Des Moines, was the home of Maytag, right? And Maytag basically shut down their production, laid off a lot of employees, those kinds of things. That community was throwing everything at it and still couldn't make progress because the housing market in Des Moines was hotter. So all the developers, all the construction work is in Des Moines. They don't have interest in a little town when they're shooting fish in a barrel in a metropolitan city making record profits, right? And so it's a balance of all of that. And I think it probably takes some effort from both sides, which is why I think probably some of this LDPC and committee will help us tackle some of those issues and help us really have a community conversation about how do we do this, but how do we do it smartly?
Yeah, Paul.
Again, to all those points, we've talked about it even with big commercial recruitment. We talk about big box stores. One of the first questions they ask is, what can you do for me? What incentives do you have? Should we have that at the residential level for local contractors, for local developers, or even outside ones, right? And having that, to be able to bridge that gap, because again, and I think the key word that comes back to me on this is investment. This is a direct investment into our community. If they are local tax dollars, sales tax dollars, magic fund dollars, whatever it is, right? And Dave will tell me what I can and cannot do, what the city can and cannot do, and play devil's advocate, which is his job. But it's one of those things where, okay, you put $10,000 into 60 single family lots that are, again, I'll use the numbers, a couple $100 a year, to now we're going to get that paid back in 5 years. We're going to get that money back, and then it's a perpetual thing. And then that money is forever going back into the coffers, reducing the cost of the property tax burden on everyone else. To me, that's what this has to be viewed as when we're looking at housing development. It has to be an investment into the future. It has to be something that, in the long term, we are giving up something today for something tomorrow. So that to me is where I'm at. And again, like one of the things that one of the individuals that I've talked to one of the individuals that I had when I put local lender on here was, one of the things that Minot doesn't do is special assessments. And again, that's a conversation for the council to have when it comes to what recommendations, or for this committee to have when it comes to actually, offering something up or ratifying something. But that is one thing, that is a very clear thing that City of Minot doesn't do on a very small scale, that other communities are doing and are seeing growth. Whether it's Grand Forks, Bismarck, Fargo, they are going gangbusters with a lot of their development and their housing development through the offering of special assessments. Is that what I'm advocating for in this? No. Is there some other mechanism that we can use? No, but we have to start doing something. So.
Jordan?
Yeah, I actually agree with that. You know, do people like specials? No. Do people complain about specials in Fargo and Horace and all those places? Absolutely. But where are the houses getting built? They're getting built there. And the reason they're getting built there is because if I'm a developer and I have a choice to develop anywhere in North Dakota, Minot is probably the highest cost place to develop. Even if you don't factor the specials in, we got those things working against us. And now you factor in that all of our peer cities in North Dakota are offering those things. Whether I like them or not, if I'm a developer and I know this city's gonna grease the wheels, that's maybe the wrong way to put it. And I mean, I don't know if that's, if it's specials or what, they're gonna go where their return on investment, to what you said, Mr. City Manager, is the highest. And right now, that's not Minot. And you factor in the shock of inflation on the infrastructure costs. I tend to believe in this country there's a lot of what I would call head in the sand inflation. We haven't taken our heads out of the sand to actually realize how bad it is. I mean, I think you see the sticker shock on things like your Ramstead project. Everybody's thinking, oh, it can't be that much. What if it is? If it is, then my house is going up a lot in value, because it's going to cost an arm and a leg to get these homes built. And, I just think that, you look to what you said about home builders not being developers. We've had some developers that have had tough times in this town, and, in the past, and I've seen it firsthand, and we don't have a lot of them knocking down our door to come here anyways. It's not like we have Lennar or, some of these big city home builders coming to Minot. They're just not. And I like the idea of cultivating developers within our community, but they don't have the financial backing to be able to do things a lot of times at a large scale. Maybe they can get there, but it's going to take some time, and there's going to be gaps. And what we're going to see is that, if that's the case, we need to find a way to get everybody to, want to build homes. And I think some of this is a really good step, but I think some of it's just, to what you said, like making sure that people our home builders are active, engaged, and really maximizing what they can do.
Okay, so I think the good news is that the motion that we've got heads us down a path that gives us some options, right? I think that's the key to what we're doing right here. It gives the council some options and some ideas on a starting point, and then it allows the conversations. Because I think that's where we've got to get to, right? I mean, I think there's wisdom in both directions, and we have to, the magic usually happens between those two directions, right? I think that's kind of the idea here. So anything further before we finish up? Okay, go ahead and call the roll, Kayla.
Hittner,
Yes.
Blessum,
Yes,
Howe,
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
great. Okay, so there's a couple pieces left there, Paul. You want to?
Combine consolidated data from different agencies, potential site selectors.
So do you want to remove the one before that?
That's what I
the
was
Magic Fund
wondering.
Screening
I'll make a
Committee?
motion. I'll make a motion to the role of Magic Fund Screening Committee. I'll remove that.
Okay, is there a second to
A
that?
second.
Okay, any discussion on that? Okay, call the roll.
Hittner,
Yes.
Blessum,
Yes.
Howe,
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Okay, then the last one, Paul, if you want to. Okay, any thoughts related to that last bullet, the combined consolidate data?
Were we discussing like the lowest system with this? Is this this is what comes to mind when I read this one. Refresh. It's been a minute since
I'm
we've
trying to
met.
remember what this one was
Well,
about
and
too.
if I remember right, there was a Visit Minot component. There's a bunch of different disparate data sources in my mind, and for me, it's a lot of making sure Brian has right at hand if he is talking to somebody. Here's what our package is, and making sure the whole group is working together. That was where my mind went.
Right, and ultimately that's what Lois or some other equivalent does. We contract with MACDC to keep that data up to date. But that would include information like, is water and sewer capacity available at the site or within a certain number of feet? And what level of capacity is available? What electrical capacity is available? Even what electrical company are you dealing with? And those kinds of things. And so I think as long as we stay on that track, we may choose to use a different method or a different site other than Lois, but at the end of the day, that's what that is trying to accomplish.
I think these were retail coach, if I remember. Mike, is that what you're kind of getting? Retail coach numbers, demographics,
Oh,
numbers
yes.
like that. That
Well,
was,
it was all of them.
Yep,
in
and
my
having
mind,
a-
because we, I remember a discussion at one point about saying, look, should the city have a website that is exactly that? Here's all the site selection
Okay.
information that needs to be out
Yeah,
there.
getting
So-
the data for Visit Minot, the data for MACDC, and the data for the city on retail recruitment, those kinds of things. And Brian went to the conference here in Vegas here a few months ago. He was looking for vendors. I have not had a chance to debrief with him on what the success was with that, but you're correct. That was what we were going for here.
Mark, did you want to add something while we're?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick update on a couple of those items. So Lois is now a platform and a program that the state is paying for, with the entire state being able to take advantage of that. So that won't be something that we'll have to pay for as a city coming around the next time. And there's another program attached to that called Lasso that does something similar to this from a site selector standpoint to try and collate information. You have to populate it still, which is fine. You have work to do as a developer or as a chamber or as a city to put information into a website, but then it becomes visible for site selectors and for national and local brands who are interested. So there's some good movement tied to this effort or tied to the goal here of trying to collect and consolidate data and information. I don't know that, at least from the viewpoint of the Chamber EDC, I don't know that there's something that we need to do in the very immediate future tied to this. I do know that Brian and I have had good conversations along with Visit Minot in the last few months on what does that data look like? Does anyone out there actually provide all of that data under one umbrella, and then at what cost? One vendor I have that been talking to me just started working with Fargo. It's a $25,000 a year cost to do that. That's the start of it. So, and how many people do you want to have access to that, and how visible does that become? So, that's a going standard rate. I mean, I've heard 50,000 very easily for a year. They're not cheap to do that, but I also think it's that's where the bar has been raised for everybody. That's becoming the standard of what you need to do in order to be visible in that world. So throwing that out there, I don't know that there's anything to be done currently, at least from our viewpoint. We're seeing some movement in other areas that is valuable for us.
Yeah,
Right, go ahead,
Mark,
Paul.
just so when you talk about working with Fargo, those companies, you're talking like a retail coach or something like
It's
that?
not, yeah. Data collection has 28 different names.
Yep.
Retail coach does it specifically to get you a sixth McDonald's, a
Yep.
Chick-fil-A, a Costco.
Is it kind of along the lines of like just of us trying to be a for sale by owner community, or are we trying to get a realtor? Is that what you're kind of, is that kind of?
No, I don't know that it's, I don't, it could be, Mr. Chairman, Paul, I don't know that that's a fabulous analogy, but it is a visibility thing.
Okay.
So I know that that's part of it, but also it's about knowing your data. I mean, whether you're for sale by owner or whether you're a realtor, if you don't know your data, I don't care that you're a realtor or that you're for sale by owner. You've got to have your data.
And I'm talking like just in the visibility, like you say, just to even play in that market.
Some of it's visibility, but some of it is clearly
Okay.
what's the data.
What does it say?
And data collection is not cheap. It's not something you just go, I pay someone $50 a month to collect data. That doesn't happen. You won't get data.
And I remember, both during these discussions as well as the discussions we had where we were looking at the retail coach contract and looking at replacements for that where my mind got to, I remember, was the primary focus here is on the data package. It's really on making sure that when we are in a discussion that we've got something where we can say, here's who we are, and this is what we've got available. That made a lot of sense to me. The other pieces about making the connections and all of that stuff was sort of a secondary part of it. And to me, we've got to have that in place. And I think that's what this bullet was getting at, was to say, do we want to direct council to say, hey, you probably want to put some effort here, because we've got different efforts going on, whether it's city, Visit Minot, chamber. We gotta get them working together, was where my mind went. Go
Yeah,
ahead, Paul.
and again, we at Visit Minot, the Visit Minot board does pay for some data collection. I don't know if it completely accomplishes, and maybe Mark, you've worked with maybe more with that data collection with Steph. I don't know if that accomplishes everything that we need, but if it is, it
doesn't.
It doesn't.
No,
Okay.
And same with the data collection that we do, doesn't collect it for all three.
Okay.
Same with the collection that Retail Coach does. It doesn't collect it for all three. You could throw $5,000 a year at data collection and get about that much data collection. Or you could throw a fair amount of money and get a bit more. It's such a big world. And you're never going to pay. I feel like you're going to have a hard time appeasing everybody all the time with your data. You could spend 6 figures a year on data collection and still come up short. Some developer's going to ask some random thing that is not in your data collection. So you got to go after 80, 90% of the data that someone might expect at a reasonable price, whatever that might be.
Yeah, and so I guess in your mind, is there something the council should talk about to work with Visit Minot, to work with the chamber, to try to do this? If each of you is only getting 40% of the puzzle right now with your own contracts, doing your own work, is there something to be gained from directing you to do it together?
Mr. Chairman, if their funding is there, because it's not cheap. I mean, this isn't going to happen based on current funding sources, not in my opinion.
Again, kind of going back to a little bit what Mark's talking about and what we directed Brian to do. We went to ICSC in Vegas. Data is key here, and I think that's the key thing to remember here, which is why I would recommend that this bullet point continue to stay. To continue to have up-to-date, relevant data is a key to helping guide us in being attractive and reaching out and connecting with potential matches for our community. The challenge is that in that data world, everyone's creating their own specialties, right? There's a company that specializes in what Visit Minot needs for recruiting, lodging, and tourism. There's groups that specialize in what the chamber needs as far as the data that's necessary for primary sector and manufacturing and those kinds of things. And then there's, companies that specialize in the data that the city is looking for recruiting retail and those kinds of things. But there isn't a company that really does all of those. And if there is, I don't know if there's a company that does all of those really well, that can compete against those individual specialty niche companies that specialize in just those factors. The odd thing is that they're all using the basis of the Esri data. They're all just running it through different algorithms and different perspectives and interpretations to meet certain clientele needs. And again, I haven't had a chance to debrief with Brian from his visit to ICSC in Vegas to see if he came across any companies that are starting to connect those niches and those markets together. But at the end of the day, I do agree that the priority here, and maybe this bullet point needs to be reworded, and that is we need to have access to the data and we need to keep it up to date.
And so I guess where my mind goes, when I'm in my mind, where I go with combining it is, if all three entities right now are spending, say, 12 to 25,000, so we're spending a total of 50. Do we need one good contract that spends 50 among the three of us, so that we're doing what we can to get it all and all have access?
Sure, as long as we can find someone that we can spend
Yeah.
$50,000, it gives us everything that we need.
Right,
yeah.
right,
I would agree.
exactly.
It would be good to consolidate it. I just don't know if that option exists yet.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, go
So
ahead, Paul.
maybe this is a discussion, again, best had at the council level on, again, I think everybody here sees it. I think the management team sees the importance of data collection. And
Yep.
if we want to be effective with marketing our community, we need to do that. So would a motion to encourage the council to continue investing in data collection? I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay,
Okay.
any more discussion?
And again, for that reason, I leave it up to some of the professionals we have, right? Whether it be the city manager, whether it be the chamber EDC, Visit Minot, if they can work with each other, or if we can find that one size fits all contract, like City Manager Stewart said. Don't know if that exists, right? You got somebody who's good at the surface level stuff, but then when you get into a chain restaurant, or you get into a hotel, or you get into manufacturing, what are these individuals looking for? It might take that specialized data, but I think it is important that we continue to do that. Otherwise, again, they aren't going to see us if we're not out there, if we're not marketing ourselves, if we don't have that data to present. Because again, and I'll ask this maybe of City Manager Stewart, when you have a site selector, someone looking to build or invest in a community, call it a manufacturing, or even Mark or someone from the chamber can answer this. Are individuals doing their own data collection, or are they looking for the city to provide that?
It's a combination of both. I would say, in essence, what we're looking for data is to help us target those potential, whether you're looking at tourism, manufacturing, industrial, retail, what you're trying to do is trying to get your foot in the door that they're willing to have a conversation with you. You need the data to get you to that point. Once you go beyond that point, then yes, most of those companies are doing their own data analysis to determine whether or not your community fits their business plan and whether or not they're willing to invest in your community. Okay, so for example, I'll give an example. We talked to Costco recently, right? We had enough data to kind of get their attention and start a conversation, and we offered all kinds of data. We offered to go have a meeting with them, and they said, you know what, you're wasting all of your time in trying to do that because we have our proven data that we look at, and we're not going to use anybody else's data. The question, though, is, again, as I started, is we need enough data that's relevant that we can give them the general picture up front that piques their interest, that they're willing to begin looking at and begin their own data process in making that decision for your community.
We need this for the first date. This is our first
You
date.
need it for phase
data.
one,
Okay.
potentially into phase two. When you get into the deeper phases, you're transitioning to someone else that we probably can't afford to do that and do it at that level.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, and to Harold's points, he's spot on. And it's not even just we need this for the first date. We need this to be visible that we are interested in dating. So 50, 60, 70%, as the statistics show, are not calling me or Harold or Brian or anybody before they find out whether or not they like your community. They're Googling you, right? And if you don't have that visible data that's good, that's readily accessible, they move on. There's 800 communities in our country that are over 50,000 people. There's 400 communities between 50,000 and 100,000. They have plenty of other places with population that they could go to, any one of these places. So we have to stand out with good data. Most of those places, I haven't looked at 200 of the 400, but you look at the good ones that are doing it, most of the good ones have a really good data site, have a really good data visibility online, so that someone knows, hey, I'm interested in dating you. And then you've got to attract them and go from there. But the data gets your foot in the door.
And Mark, so if Trinity's recruiting a doctor to come in, does it work there as well?
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, making sure that we've got the right information out there, so we want people to get the right picture of the community, right? I mean, we're highlighting the right things. We're highlighting the Huss Fest and the State Fair and all the great things about our community. And I think it's not just the recruitment side of it for businesses. It's also
Workforce.
It's a great place to live,
Yeah,
right?
Workforce, it's quality of life. Some of those data points are anecdotal, but some of those data points are exactly that. It's the data.
Right. Paul, did you have something?
No, I was just gonna. I guess the question I was gonna ask was, when you have those data sites, do they break or segment down the data? Like when you say, like from a Visit Minot, like, hey, this is your lodging data, this is your manufacturing data. Does that make any sense as
Yep.
far as
Yep.
delineating some of that stuff? So if we
Some
did
of those
have
can
sort
do
of one-stop shop for data on our website, or whether it be the chamber's website or whatever it might be. And I guess I don't know how protective people are over their data. If hey,
Very.
again, we paid for this. This is ours. We don't want to share it. Yeah,
Well,
again.
and that to me is the point of this discussion and these bullets, is that the council is maybe in a specific position through our relationships with each of the entities to say, we would like to see this level of work together here. Yeah, there's certain things you're going to hold close to the vest, and I think that's perfectly fine. But we all have the same goal. And so what best foot forward can we put out publicly so that working together, we've got the right package?
And
That's where my mind goes.
And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I would encourage us all to not let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yep.
Or great. Hopefully we can get to a great solution. Right now we don't have a good solution in my mind for data. And this can help us get to a good or a great solution that helps illustrate and really put our best foot forward for data.
Okay. And so with that, Paul, so we've got on the screen, if everybody can see it, we've got, Michaela has added a bullet that says, consider the continued investment in data collection. Would you want to amend to remove the one below it? They're meant to do the same thing.
I was going to remove it. I just didn't know if we wanted to consider anything about like, because some of the conversation has included combining all the data to create a package.
So yeah.
This one is, the
Again.
one that you had put forward is just a continued investment in
Yep.
data.
So I see us getting rid of the last line in place of the motion that I made. The one consideration that I would have would be, do we want to, with that motion, consider the continued investment and, I don't know what the right word would be, marketing or display, when we talk about
Presentation, yeah.
presentation of data on the city's website, so that, the Visit Minot data is out there, the Chamber's data is out there, the city's data is out there for individuals that Trinity's recruiting someone to whatever level that would be acceptable to the organizations.
Well,
that pay
and one of the things that came to my mind when we talked about this before was that I think that SRT still owns Minot.com. And should Minot.com be this for all of it? And that is the one-stop shop where you can, if you want to, you can break off from there. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if that's still the way that that's laid out. But I do think that there's a presentation layer of this that's an important piece. Omar.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, in many of these companies that I've had conversations with lately, collecting data goes hand in hand with a website. So it's not, but that's where it gets a little divided in this community is, not this community, Minot, but divided in the community of data collection and how to display it is some entities will say, well, I want my tourism data on this site to do this. Well, you can go pay someone to do that for you on that site, but then someone's got to get to your site, which is fine. Sometimes you can Google and get there, but now I got to go to a different site to go get the site information for the city of Minot. But then the city of Minot only put up that city data and doesn't put the tourism data. So many people have found that you get it all on another website. Now, do we need another website for someone to handle? And then you pay for more fees, and then the cost of, so just realize that there are pros and cons to either direction, and communities do both of them. So
I think the good news is this still directs again to look at it, right? I think that's the key. Go ahead, Paul.
Does a data directory, again, I think this is splitting hairs, just like, hey, if you're looking for this data, you put in touch with the Visit Minots, the Chambers, things like that, just to get that marketing. Maybe it's just a page on our website that directs people towards relevant data. Again, I think we're getting in the weeds a little bit, but just a
and
thought.
websites turn over like every 5 minutes. So you turn around, and no offense, our website's out of date, your website's out of date. Visit Minot website is updated all the time, and it's just. And so sometimes you just rely on someone to constantly, you rely on a contractor to help you keep that data up to date and fresh look. You have to supply a lot of the pictures and the content. But yes, there's a lot in the weeds here. It will take some time to get this right.
So Paul, Michaela's got that bullet there. Is that okay with the adjustment?
I think that encapsulates the conversation well enough to send it to council.
Okay. And Melinda, were you okay with that as a second? Okay. All right. So any further discussion? Okay. Call the roll.
Bittner,
Yes.
Blessum,
Yes.
Howe,
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Okay. So for us, a bit of a point of order to myself, because Michaela, where you've got everything laid out right now, I think our intent was that these were being elevated to recommendations. Is that correct? As we were working through these. So the ones that we've got right now are the consider establishing the Land Development Partnership Committee, and then the two there, MAC EDC to provide more detail on how funds are spent, and to consider continuing investment in data and presentation of the data. Those, in my mind, we were working on moving those to primary recommendations. Is that the understanding of everybody here? Sorry for not being clearer about that. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, because we'll have Michaela move those up then.
Okay.
Yep, to my recollection, that's how we were working through this before,
Okay,
working through these
just
items,
to make
and then
sure that
moving them
we
up
were-
to the primary recommendations.
Okay. All right. So then, yeah, go ahead, Michaela.
The only other thing I want to kind of bring up, and you can let me know, with the change in the minutes where committee member Nelson, wasn't, no, I believe, I wasn't at the meeting, but I believe that was a 3-1 vote of 4 people then,
Right, which would fail
which
under
would
that
fail the
quorum.
motion under that. So this would be removed? Correct? Am I correct in saying that?
That was the motion that was a different vote on. Is
I
that correct?
believe that was the only motion that came out of that meeting. And with it now becoming a 3-1 vote,
Well, okay, so I think that is one possible direction. The other direction that we could take, just to be very clear about it with this group, is that in my mind, the bullet right below that now is accomplishing what we were talking about. And so we can either let that vote stand. I don't know that we were clear about it, is my only concern, that we understood what those votes meant at that second. So I just want to, is that, did we fall down to 4? Did we have 4 throughout that meeting?
I wasn't at the meeting.
5 on here.
It says, at least at the beginning.
Said whoever, it was Mike, Justin, Tyler, Jordan, Paul, that voted on that one specifically.
Okay, so it was,
7-4-1.
so it was 4-1?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, then you're good.
So then we're good. So
Right, we're
that,
good.
so that, and that's in. So, but now though, that does leave open the
That
question of
means
whether that
today.
bullet should be there.
Oh, because of the bullet below.
Right.
Oh, gotcha.
Right. Because that, in my mind, heading down the path that Paul has laid out in these documents would allow for that discussion, which is the main thing we're going for here, is that this discussion continue.
Would a motion to consolidate those 2 bullet points for the council to look at an overarching kind of view or path forward, saying, if you do form this committee, you can consolidate the Renaissance Zone, Magic Fund Screening Committee, as far as economic development discussions?
Yeah, that would be in order.
So I'll make a motion to consolidate those 2 bullet points for council consideration.
Okay. Is there a second for that?
I voted against getting rid of it. I don't feel I should be the one to second.
I'll second.
Okay.
Yeah, all right.
Then we'll vote
So we
anyways,
can have the
right?
discussion. So with this, one of the things that we want to be a little bit careful about with this is that those committees have specific duties under ordinance, and there's a lot that would go into that. But again, to me, that is what that committee, it's one of the things that would be in its purview, in my mind, is to bring back recommendations down the road. So with that in mind, is there other discussion on combining those? And it's really giving a little more color to the establishment of the committee, is what it is. Go ahead, Paul.
And to me, that to that point, again, whether it's Magic Fund, Renaissance Zone, it's the consolidation of government. It's making government more efficient, and rather than having these little pockets. Sorry, there's too much garbage up here. But again, it consolidates those. We have committees that are on our website that some of us are even questioning whether or not they exist anymore, sometimes. So again, I think just through consolidating and streamlining the, government business, because I think Magic Fund Screening Committee, Renaissance Zone, if there would be a land development committee formed, I think those are all within the purview of economic development. So again, that's where I see maybe some of the efficiency coming from.
Linda?
I mean, does it make a little bit more sense to keep an economic development committee and have those under the umbrella of that? With reports from the 3, or if you're structuring.
Jordan?
I think my concerns, which, largely led me to vote no last time. One, I felt like it kind of came out of left field a little bit. I wasn't thinking that was coming up for that meeting, but, Renaissance Zone, this new committee, they're going to be, maybe strike this out, but Renaissance Zone and the Magic Fund, those are two different funding sources. So there's two different, constituencies, if you will. One is the taxpayers, property taxpayers, and the other is your sales tax payers. And that was kind of where my mindset had come from. The other side of it was whether it was even allowable under the Magic Fund statute or in our city code. And frankly, it was just that I didn't know the answer to that. Because I do know that the Magic Fund Screening Committee is under the city code that created the Magic Fund itself.
And I think just to add to that, Jordan, real fast, what I worried about now that I remember it is also with the Renaissance Zone, because that's created in state law. It may be that we have to have that committee under state law no matter what.
Right.
And I don't know the answer to that offhand, but
Right.
that's the other thing that along those same lines would be there as well. Harold?
This is probably something that maybe city staff can look at, but I do agree that Renaissance Zone does meet some functions as outlined very clearly in state law. Your Magic Fund Committee is created locally through ordinance, but I don't know that that means that you can't have one committee that can serve both functions. For example, there's multiple examples of the council serving multiple functions. You're the assessment board of the community. And even though you're the same people sitting around the dais, you're still the same group that does that, right? So there may be some overlap here that we can meet that meets the intent of this and makes it more efficient. So you may be able to get both at the same time.
Okay. Yeah.
You
Jordan?
know, one of the things I thought about with the Magic Fund Committee, and obviously we don't meet very often because we haven't had a lot to meet about, and that breeds inefficiency. It breeds committee members who aren't up to speed because you might have gotten on the committee a year ago and never heard from the city again until we have a meeting, I believe, next week. Maybe there's opportunities there for, and this was all kind of 11th hour, and I don't want to beat a dead horse. The one thing that's running through the traditional mindset of the Magic Fund that's actually happening and happening regularly is the flex space. Maybe the Magic Fund Screening Committee at some point could just take over the administration of those flex space programs. And then we're meeting every month. And we probably have better, more engaged board members as a result. But I don't know that I'm comfortable putting that into this at this point of the process. But maybe the next time the guidelines get rewritten, it's maybe something we could take a look at if we're not going to have 10, 11, Magic Fund requests every year where you have one a month or whatnot.
So Jordan, with that in mind, would that be replacing the Souris Basin board in that role? Is that how that would function?
Yeah, I mean, unless you guys as a council believe that Souris Basin does it better, then, do I think they do? I mean, they're not here to defend themselves today, but I don't know that they do. I mean, I've heard rumblings from bankers about things being slow to turn around and things like that. You would know that you'd have once a month that you're meeting at the city level to get things done. And I don't think those things I've heard are new concerns. And like I said, it's not something I think that should go into this report, but, would that be a way to task an already standing committee to have, responsibilities? I mean, the risk of it is you go back to a situation of pre-Bakken bust and you're getting requests left and right.
you know, that'll become a very involved committee. It ebbs and flows so much with the local economy. And right now, I mean, there's lots of discussions, and they're all confidential, which is fine. I get that. But I can only judge it based on what I see coming through the system. And right now, there's not very much. So, I mean, and I look back, like, you know, shrinking government. I'm a big believer in that myself, but I don't know what it actually costs to have a Magic Fund screening committee. Like, we don't even get breakfast, you know, which is fine. I'm not asking for it, but, like, you know, it's just, you know, I think the biggest thing that we're hurting on is, you know, it's really hard to keep board members engaged when there's no meetings, and it's really hard to have meetings just to have meetings when there's nothing to talk about. So,
Yeah. Okay, so just to be clear on what we've actually got on the table right now, I don't know that we have a motion. Do we, Michaela?
Well,
It was a motion
it
to
was
consolidate the two.
Consolidate, right,
I
okay.
kind of tried to do that with this highlighted portion. I mean, yes, there's still that one, and I would delete that, but does that consolidate it to how you would like it to go to council? This
I
grayed out
think
portion.
for our discussion, it's probably where we want to be.
So we could
Is there-
just remove that.
Well, hold on a second, because if we don't, we've already approved that one.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Okay, so any further discussion on this motion?
you know, just a clerical point of order. Obviously, a part of this bullet point, I voted against. Obviously, with the meeting makeup today, I could vote no again and it dies. And I don't think that's fair.
I would maybe agree. So let me ask.
And I'm willing, what I'm willing to say is I'm willing to vote yes, even though I voted no, to speed this thing along.
If you vote no, it doesn't, it just keeps them as separate items.
Okay.
So they both move forward just
Okay.
separately.
Okay.
So actually,
that's
one
a good
other point on that as well is that, you know, as we've talked through it, I am interested in the discussion around the Land Development Partnership Committee. I've been interested all along in some consolidation of economic development efforts to make sure that we avoid what you're talking about, Jordan, which is we've got a whole bunch of silos where the silos don't really ever meet because there isn't enough activity. But one of them with a set meeting schedule handles all those pieces, and there's always activity then. That's where my mind goes with it. So for me, I don't know that the specificity of combining these exactly is how we get there. But I do think looking at whether you call it the Land Development Partnership Committee or if it spurs the council to look at this, I think that's what I'm going for. That's what I would like to see. So for me, I'll maybe vote no here, but it's not because I don't think this is the right discussion. It definitely is. I just don't know that this does exactly the way we want to. Okay? Anything further? for
All I'm
anybody?
gonna say is if
Yeah.
we have a regularly scheduled meeting and we always have work on the table, maybe we'll be able to get people some breakfast.
There you go.
Fair?
All right. Go ahead, Michaela, call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Blessem,
No.
Howe,
Yes.
Nelson.
Guess it doesn't matter, but yes.
Again, just to fall back, again, I think the intent is still there.
Yep.
It's just in two separate bullet points, so.
Yep. And so, all right, so let's just take a second here and figure out where we're at. It was my hope that we would get to the point where we can make a council recommendation today. And I don't think we're far. We got 20 minutes roughly. How are you guys feeling? Number one, we've got the fact that we're missing 3 members, which isn't great. And I would like at the very least for them to have an opportunity to be in a session where we finalize. And so my thought is we do need to go through this still and do a top to bottom cleanup if everybody's got to make sure that we don't want to word something different. There's still that step left. I think the primary work is done unless there's an additional motion somewhere. But what are you guys feeling? Should we power through and get it done in the next 20 to 40 minutes and get it ready for council because we can go there? And legally, I don't think, well, I mean, there isn't a lot of legal precedent here. It's more of a committee precedent more than anything else. So we can power through and do that? Or would you rather schedule one more session? Paul?
I'll ask you this, Chairman Blessing. Do you feel this will be, if we did power through this, we could give the opportunity for any of these members that are not present to come speak at council to their intentions of this, to their you know, how they perceived that this was to go forward. So again, I think we can do the work now.
Yep.
But I'm fine either way. I'm fine
Okay.
either way.
Any other thoughts? Okay, with that in mind, let's do the work and get it done so that we've got a complete document. And as Paul said, there's certainly opportunity for them to come and speak at council as well. So with that in mind, let's start with the background. We've been through this once. Is there anything here that anybody would like to see adjusted? I think we've been there and hopefully that part's looking okay. It's really just background. Okay, the what is development and success? Again, we've been through this. We've done a couple of iterations. We adjusted some bullets. Any adjustments anybody'd like to see there? Okay, hearing none. On to the primary recommendations. So,
I will state I did add the MAC EDC's information right here, so if that's not how you wanted it to look, that would probably be the only change.
okay, go down because I also wanna make sure, all right, so we grabbed those pieces. Once again, my thought was that the committee recommendation was also a primary recommendation. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah.
That's the way I
okay.
intended that. So let's pull that up.
Both or just,
I think the consolidate was in notes all along. And that was left as is. This one to me
Yep.
was a primary recommendation. Again, just to be clear, in my mind, the difference between these two things are the primary list, we actually expect the council to look one by one and take action, whether they want to start pursuing them. Where the other notes are, hey, for the future, keep this stuff in mind. That's the way I think of those. Okay, any other adjustments to the primary recommendations? One thing to note, Brian Billingsley did a nice job and got us all a report on the facade program, which was a survey of the recipients. And you know, as I read it, I was glad to see that people were glad and excited about what happens. The one thing I'll always note is if you wanted to write me a check for $100,000 to do something, I'd probably be happy with how the program works. So, I think that's to be expected. At the same time, I think one of the things that we learn from a survey like that, and that's why I'm glad that Brian is doing them, is that while those things are good, we also need our processes to be good. We need, if you read through the comments, we need people to feel confident in how the processes work and that they're getting the information and that it's not a moving goal line all the time and that's working. And that's across government. We want efficient and factual and working good, right, Jordan?
I think when I read that earlier today, my one thought was exactly to what you just said. I mean, it's pretty hard to not have a favorable opinion of, getting a check cut to you. If you were to poll the taxpayers of the city, you'd probably get, a small amount would say, oh, it's a favorable program. You'd have a similarly small, but maybe slightly bigger amount that would say, not for me. And you'd probably have a massive bucket that would say, what the heck is the facade program?
Right.
And so, I mean, it's good to know that it's working well for those that are getting it and utilizing it. But I think the council ultimately, and you're accountable to your constituents, has to decide if this is a worthy use of the funds at that level.
Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, and I agree with you, Jordan. I think you could probably ask a number of citizens. You could poll the city of Minot and say, what's our percentage of sales tax? What is sales tax? And most people wouldn't know what they're even paying because they swipe their card, they pay their gas, and they leave. Again, so much apathy with what's going on within the city. To me, it was exciting to see. Yes, hard to not be favorable to the program for these individuals, but I'm happy that they took the time to have the responses, and it is a large investment still on their part into these projects. So,
Yeah. Brian, did you want to add a little bit to
Yeah,
that?
I just want to let the committee know that we've had 13 customers, and I sent this survey to all 13. I received 11 responses, which was great. So the comments are great. Please read the comments, and it really explains that if it wasn't for this program, you'd see little or no investment happening in our downtown right now.
I think, I guess, just a caveat to that, Brian, I didn't take exactly that take from it. I think that there were some respondents that may not have done anything. I think the vast majority, if I remember the numbers right, said, yeah, we would have done what was required to make sure it wasn't falling down. And there was a good group of them that said, yeah, we probably would have anyway. So I think it's all of the above to a certain
It's-
extent. And certainly $100,000 or $180,000 makes it a
Yeah.
lot easier
And
to
Mr.
consider.
Chairman, I did say little to no investment, little being the minimal repairs necessary.
Yep. Paul.
Brian, do you have a number of private dollars that have been invested into this? You know, obviously, we know the city's share.
Right.
Can you-
Yeah, I've looked into that. Of these 13 applications, the applicant's share was 33% of $2.7 million.
So the city
So-
share was
About
2/3.
67% is what the city kicked in.
Of 2 points, did you say 2.7?
2.7 million overall.
So the city's got about 1.8 in, then the private developers have or the
Right.
owners have 900,000 into it. Yeah, well, and again, you know, I think back to this whole idea of surveying the public, if you said to the public, do you like the way downtown is shaping up and how nice it looks? I think we'd get great response. I think that it's absolutely the case. If you also on that said your share of paying for that was X, we'd get a whole bunch of what?
Yeah.
How am I paying for that building? And again, that's why the analogy I gave everybody before, my wife loved looking at the $600,000 houses. You know, of course you're going to.
Yeah.
But the question is that realistic and is it feasible? And I think that's what this program is, such a nice microcosm of the economic development theory and discussion that needs to keep happening, right? Because there's no question it's worked. It's created nice looking buildings downtown. There's no question about that. If you spend $2.7 million beautifying downtown, it's going to be noticeable, and that's a good thing.
And Mr.
Paul.
Chairman, I think the one thing the committee needs to realize is every penny of these dollars goes back in the local economy. It goes to the contractors, the tradesmen, the building supply companies. It all is being circulated through our city economy.
And that was part of my point there. When you look at creating jobs, creating work for contractors, small opportunities for small businesses, on top of the caveat, again, we caveat all these things, right? But caveat that it comes from 15% of one penny that's designated for going to the Magic Fund or economic development or flood control. And when it comes to flood control, it's $2.7 million. You know, or $1.8 million into $1 billion project. Are we going to see that return on that investment in flood control, or is it more impactful going into our local businesses and going to our local contractors and putting people to work in the community? And again, I think is it right or wrong? It's just a part of the conversation.
Decision, yep. Okay, Jordan?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I see with it, and I've got some comments I'll make at some point here on the report as a whole, but you know, you're taking the resources of the many and we're divvying it to the few, i.e. the few being the 13 or however many people have gotten these funds. Kind of feels like in the 8 months I've been on this committee that's economic development in a nutshell. We're taking everybody's money and channeling it to the few and creating, you know, winners and losers. Maybe not losers, but we're creating winners. And I look at it, and it's one of the things I brought up, and I wasn't alone, I don't believe, in this right away. 2/3, so 67 cents of every dollar that was spent on those projects was covered by the city, but if People's State Bank of Velva wanted to improve its facade, we'd get nothing. How is that supposed to sit well with the many? And I get it. Everybody wants a nice downtown. Doug Burgum created that phenomenon in Fargo, and we all see it and we all want it. He had a big checkbook too. But
that's a lot. I mean, at some level, there's got to be pride and ownership, and keeping your place up too. I mean, if anything, it should be 1/3, 2/3 in my book. And I think that's one of the things I've seen in this report. My first thought when I was reading it this morning, it's pretty light. And as far as spending, there's really nothing in it as far as looking at spending. And we trotted all the department heads of all these different organizations up here over the last 8 months, and they largely had to, campaign for the status quo. But that's not what I see in the community and really across the country. People are either tired or they can't pay on a lot of these things. And we've got this, head in the sand inflation that I was referring to earlier, where it's getting tough for people. And, reading this other article this morning about people, having a negative connotation towards Minot. Well, I mean, I think a lot of it is you see in the apathy, people just don't think things are going to change. And, I got a feeling whatever happens here in the next 10 minutes, this report's probably going to get largely shelved until the election in August. And then whatever happens, happens. And depending on how that goes, economic development in this town could look very, very different. And, I guess I'm just kind of sad that we didn't have more of a mindset towards, hey, we can identify some things and have the humility or humility is the wrong word, but the foresight to say, maybe this program, that program, maybe they're not working as well as they could. Maybe we could cut some costs here to redeploy it to something like this landowners incentive program. But instead, what will probably happen is that we will see a growth in expenditures towards all of these things because we will try to protect all of the spending. And I just don't think that's where the constituency's at. And I guess you'll probably see this summer here. I mean, there's some lines being drawn as far as where things are at, and that's fine. I'm not advocating one way or the other, honestly. But see where the people are.
Paul?
And again, actually, I kind of disagree with a lot of that, Jordan, just because in this, some of the recommendations we have consider a different cost share of the program. We have consider a sunset to this program. Those are all recommendations for the council to consider. Those are listening to constituents. Those are listening to the economics of what's going on. I don't have my head in the sand about anything on this stuff. I understand that, hey, sometimes things change. Our economy is very different than what it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So I believe this committee has done a lot of good work to provide recommendations for the council to consider. They're in here. So some of what you said is just absolutely false. Those recommendations are outlined in here, and it is up for the council to decide. And if we want to shift those funds, because again, it's very clearly the city doesn't have unlimited dollars. It'd be nice if we did, again, but we don't have unlimited dollars. So in order for us to do some of these other programs, whether it be the land development committee, we will have to pull back on some of these other investments in some of these other areas. And hopefully for those 13 individuals that have utilized the program to this point, and anyone that will in the future to the sunset, which I expect there to be a sunset established at the council level, they utilize it and they take advantage of that opportunity while it's there. While the city was contributing to a public-private partnership, I think those are the impacts. We're not just, and again, we're trying to preserve history. We're trying to make sure that, and we're trying to polish it. We're trying to take pride in our community. We talk about the beautification, and that alone, we've heard about, if we just mowed the ditches coming into town, it would make town look better. If it wasn't a concrete jungle coming into town. This is taking it a step further and trying to get private investment into these areas, private investment into their properties. And again, whether or not philosophically we agree on that, that's the beauty of the discussion, right? Like Mike said, the two sides of the spectrum when we come in, and that's what we're doing through these conversations. So,
And as I reflect back on these months, I have, Jordan, I think there is those bullets specifically under facade.
Yes,
where
I see that.
See that?
So facades are sacrificial land.
Yep. Well, and to a certain extent, I agree with your thought process, because as I've tried to kind of load this all into my mind as we start heading back to council with it, the thought that comes to my mind is, and I, Tyler's been a big advocate for these programs and pushed hard on those, and he's not here, and so I'm not going to go too far here. But the point of it is, the feel that I've got from at least some of our members is that we certainly don't want to pull back on any of them.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything, the one problem we've got is that we're not doing enough, and that we really, if we just had a little bit more funds, or if we could direct it a little bit more, we just need to do more. And I think there is a relatively deep philosophical divide there, and that's okay. That's the beauty of the discussion, and I think that's the beauty of the discussion that the council will have, because it's the same idea.
And to what you said, Paul, and both of what you just said about spending more, for all I know, you're right. I think that, if what we're spending is good, would 20% more get us more positive results here and there? Probably. It's just kind of like what you just said. If you spend $3 million downtown, you get nice buildings. We know that. Am I willing to walk around town with a sign on my back that said, I advocated for spending more on economic development in this community of your tax dollars? Heck no. I don't think that's the message. And I don't know that I don't know if I would campaign on that. And I don't want to get into campaign stuff. I think that's beyond what we probably should be doing. But I'm trying to look out for the person who lives here that's not an investor. And frankly, is that at risk to myself? Sure. I should probably just shut up and hope that shutting up spurs more movement of funds to the People's State Bank of Alva, my employer. But I don't know that I see a lot of those folks being, their mindsets being taken in here. I think there's a lot of great things that have come out of this. I think there's a lot of good to this, and how it can get, structured. But if I would have had my druthers, I would have liked to have seen us take every economic development program and rank it in priority, top to bottom, and then come back to the council and say, hey, council, here's what you spent on economic development last year. When you get to your budget process, maybe you only got 85% of what was available because you got pipes that need replacing, a bridge that needs replacing, and we got to move some money around to free some things up for that. I mean, you could start from the bottom and work your way up, or haircut so many of them, and give you guys some flexibility as a council to decide, hey, what's important and what's a little less important. But I kind of got the mindset that it's all important. And maybe it is, but I don't know how that's going to go over for you guys with the constituency. That's just where I'm at on it. And I don't mean any ill will towards any of the organizations. I mean, money is hard to come by in a lot of things, and I don't want to see anybody's budgets cut, but if our citizenry is having to trim their budgets, I mean, it's only fair.
Paul?
I agree. I mean, we could prioritize these things and from top to bottom. When you talk about reallocating funds, I'll start with that one. When we talk about reallocating funds, we have to understand that per ordinance, there's only so much we can do with these dollars. We can't just say, hey, we're going to take these dollars, these millions of dollars in economic development portion of the penny, we're going to pay for roads or bridges. We can't, per ordinance. Jenna, Dave, give me a thumb. Okay, I've got that one right. So when we talk about prioritizing these things, the idea that economic development for the city, outside of partnering with Chamber EDC and other organizations, we've only recently started to partner with organizations like Visit Minot at more of a contract level. Before it was the city took a back seat and we just let things happen. We had the Magic Fund Screening Committee was probably the closest thing to economic development that we had, and it really, to your admission, didn't really do much, right? Like over the years, we meet once a year, you know. So when it comes to what are we doing with these dollars, part of it is the lack of ideas. You know, I was an advocate for the facade improvement program because we really weren't doing anything with these dollars. So when I changed the ordinance and made the motion to change the ordinance in 2018 for the city to take a more active role, it was so that we could even start having these. We wouldn't even be having this conversation if it wasn't for that ordinance change. Maybe to some people's delight, I don't know. But again, if we're here, that's why I bring the land ordinance development. It's like, hey, this is another idea. Maybe it is time to shift gears. Maybe downtown doesn't need any more assistance. Maybe we can pull back on our help there. Maybe we can go to the outside boundaries of the city. To rank them one by one to 10, or however many options we have in here, it could change tomorrow.
Good.
You know, and it could change the next month. It could change the next year. It could change, you know, you have a wildfire out in Oregon that destroys lumber prices and they go through the roof and housing goes to heck and no one's building houses. Again, for me, it's just about being mobile and being able to adapt to the economic situations within the country or within the community. So again, I wish we did. I wish we had 10 more programs that we could offer up to the council and say, hey, prioritize these. Do you feel like any of these accomplish or fill the gaps within the community? And again,
And I think, you know, that kind of gets back to where my mind goes at the very beginning. While I sit on council, I don't ever want to feel like I'm trying to invent a way to spend some money.
No.
And so that's why, you know, for me, economic development is leaving it in the pockets of the people that are going to spend it in the businesses that we all have. And so we have to find good ways to do that. You know, we talked to, you know, the buzzwords have been the buzzwords lately, Paul. The buzzword of increasing the tax base is one that I frankly just kind of hate, because we've increased the tax base and our taxes are higher than ever. And I don't know if there's a certain hump that we get over and suddenly we're on the downhill and everything's great and all the taxes kind of come in line. I just don't see it. Not with another 50 years of flood funding that's got to be paid for, and not with every other infrastructure piece that we've got coming. I don't see it. I think we're always going to be right at the very edge of what is even possible under state law now that we're going to be spending, which is what I feared all along with the tax bill that was passed, is that now we're going to be in perpetual max out mode because that's all we've got. And we're going to use what we can. It really only depends on whether we do 12 million or 14 million in streets, how much we collect in property tax. That's really all we have. And so just one last thing that, you know, as I entered into this process, I thought, you know, are we doing the right things? Are we collecting the right amount of money from the people? All those pieces. We've got, you know, somewhere in the range of 2 to 2.5 million in sales tax. That's part of this penny that's going to be dedicated to these programs. And I think this is where Paul's kind of got it right, because it really comes down to where are we distributing that? What's the best possible uses for that in my mind today? Because until the people come back to us or we direct this to remove that portion, it's what the law says we're collecting. And so it's going to need to go into these buckets, and you know, the city manager and his budget, working with our partners, is going to develop how that distribution works each year, and that spending is going to occur. And I think where the good debate comes in is what's the best use for it. That's where, again, I'll go back to it. For me, saving things like the Renaissance Zone program by using actual economic development dollars to offset the cost to the taxpayer sounds like a wonderful way to use our sales tax dollars. Now, whether that's legal, that's a different question, but it's that kind of thinking to me that starts to make sense. If we're going to be giving a bunch of abatements and incentives and all these pieces, why not use the very dollars the people approved for that type of work to offset the cost to the general fund? That's where my mind goes with some of these programs. So, Jordan, did you have one last thing there?
No, I guess I think the biggest thing, you know, I looked at with some of this is, okay, so take this development incentive program. Would I rather see the funds spent on facades spent on this? 100%. I think that's a bigger need to the community, and I think it serves a greater good. Like, that's where I was looking at it from a prioritization standpoint, because you're right, Paul, it does change. This is a change. Like, I think this is more important to the community. I guess I was hoping to see more of that kind of thought. You know, what is our most important needs? And what can we do to, you know, address those without spending more money? Because you may not have it. And to what you said, I get it. Like, you can't spend sales tax on infrastructure until you go and pass an ordinance. And frankly, probably won't pass. The Park District tried to do that, and it didn't work. You know, and that is what it is too. And it's, you know, I give them credit for thinking about it and trying. But I don't know. It just doesn't feel like, I don't know. It feels like we did a whole lot of meeting, and there's probably not a whole lot that's substantial that's gonna come out of this. But
Well, the one thing I would say, Jordan, it kind of back to your point a little bit ago, the committee, one of the things I've appreciated about the committee is that it challenged my thinking and pushed me to at least understand that there are a lot of people in this community that look at this stuff as integral to us growing the way that we want to grow, right? So you don't want Mike Blesson to be king, because I'll just end a whole bunch of stuff that a lot of people think is really important. That's why we don't do this as a king, right? We do it in a representative republic, which is what we've got. Now, with that in mind, though, you know, the council is a different entity than this is. And the council may take the recommendations and work with them in a different way than we're thinking right now, and we'll see where that goes. But I do think that it opens the sort of can of worms here for that discussion to occur there, because I do think that there are some pieces and adjustments that can be made that actually could be beneficial. And if nothing else, it gave me a new perspective on all of it. Paul, I hope it did you as well, as we sit on the council. And so, you know, I appreciate the work. It's been thankless in some ways, and I appreciate everybody showing up. Just to kind of finalize, Michaela's got other committee notes. Anything to adjust in there? Because that's the last piece. I think we're sitting in a good spot.
Is everyone okay if I just delete this yellow portion? Because I think it's just probably, if this is going to council.
Just for the sake of our other members, just please bring a motion to do that.
I'll make a motion to strike that highlighted area.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion on it? Okay, call the roll.
Bittner,
Yes.
Blesson,
Yes,
Howe,
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
perfect. Okay, so at this point, what I'd be looking for then is a motion to send this recommendation to the council, along with the recommendation to dissolve the committee as an entity. That's, I believe, if I remember how HRC worked, that's how we had to kind of finish up. The council would bring a motion to finish it. Is that your thought, Harold?
I don't know if the motion to dissolve the committee is necessary. The Human Relations Committee was actually outlined in ordinance as a standing committee,
Oh,
whereas
that's
this
right.
one is set up for this specific purpose and review. And once you've given your recommendation, unless the council directs for the committee to continue, it automatically dissolves.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, so I'd be looking for a motion to send this back to the
I'll
council.
make that motion to send this back to council for review.
There a second? Okay, any discussion on it?
The only question, I had, just in the vein of dissolving, would you see this ever being kicked back to this committee for further review? Or do you think the work is done?
I think it's done. I think for my take on sitting on the council side, I see paths forward if we want to make some changes. I mean, your committee structure, I think, is a good one, and I think something we need to take a look at. So I think we've got a new route that we can take, and it doesn't have to push back to this route,
'Kay.
is my thought.
Nope.
Okay?
I
Any
just wanted
other
to hear that
discussion?
I just wanted to hear that out of your mouth.
No, I think that makes sense. Yep. Any other discussion for anybody? Okay, call the roll, Michaela.
Bittner,
Yes.
Blesson,
Yes.
Howe,
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to each of you for serving. We appreciate it very much. Also say a public thank you. Hopefully they'll go back and watch to Justin and Beth and Tyler for their contributions throughout. I would invite them to please come and speak at council when we have this. Paul, I think it's important that we have a hearing while we go through that, which may include the public as well, to put some feedback there. Again, I think, as I said just a minute ago, this was eye-opening for me, not only to get the thoughts of others, but also to learn about the programs more and to make sure that I'm equipped on the council to do the work that's coming over the coming years. And so thank you all for your time and effort in doing that. Harold, thank you to you and your team throughout, Brian in particular, Mark, the whole team from the city side as well. It's been a little bit of a long path to get here, but I think we're ready to go back to council and let the council kind of do what it needs to do from there. So anything that anybody has to add before we follow up and finish? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.